So good morning. So very interesting. I will try to extend the conversation around AI, but focus maybe on what pricing managers, how do we live with this kind of new paradigm. Okay, very long title, but the idea is so how do we tackle this transformation, and when do we do it? Okay, is it revolution? Is it something we need to start really right now? Or do we need to dose a little bit the tempo of this transformation? Okay. The truth is, we talk a lot about AI, but the territory is not really as clear as we wish. For me, AI is like a terra incognita for companies. We're not really sure about if we have to. So the Anne's presentation was very clear on that. Is it about image recognition? Is it about automation? Is it about, for instance, let's say a text or natural language processing, voice commands, and so on and so forth. The truth is technology is here. That's a reality. So today we are able to leverage technology we never thought could happen in the past years. For instance, now with autonomous driving, for instance, you have a 99% accuracy in image recognitions, road signs, for instance, the speed of reaction as well. And the question for drivers today is, do you put your life in the hands of an autonomous vehicle or in the hands of the drivers in front of you, right? There is no debate, in fact, with autonomous vehicles. The question is when. The question is how to manage the transition to autonomous vehicles, okay? Also legal and so on. That's a reality. Technology is here. You have what we call level 4, level 5 vehicles tested in the US, coming to Europe. And it's interesting because we have all been raised with this image of science fiction. So that's funny because in the pricing debates that we have, the same thing. We have a lot of, let's say, very nice presentations about how AI can impact our day-to-day, same for the sales, basically. But we have been raised with this kind of idea of fully science fiction. So what's the reality? What's the frontier, right? So the first thing is, I will provide a couple of references. The truth is, everything is possible today because of the lowering cost of production. Okay? Why? Storage, processing, and so on and so forth, as we've seen before. So there is a very interesting momentum today to tackle these challenges. Okay? Same thing in terms of accuracy and readiness of the technology. So for natural language processing, for image recognition, for instance, here you have an example for vision error rate. Since 18 months, a couple of years ago, we assume, so we see that the vision by algorithms is much more accurate than vision by humans. Okay, so now these pieces of technology that, as one mentioning, are much more mature and much more accurate than human. Okay, so do you want to put your margin in the hands of humans, or do you want to leverage maybe technology to take advantage of it right now? Okay, so again, we are in a very interesting moment where we can really focus right now on prescriptions, sorry. And what is a prescription? A prescription is a combination between data feed, okay, and for the Amazon question before, or if everybody goes to AI, that's also a question of data that you put into the models, okay? Everyone will have his own recipe of data. Pure transactions will expose you to maybe inefficiencies. Pure competitive benchmark, as we see in retail, will expose you to have your prices decided by the market, okay? And so on and so forth. It's also about judgment. We need to replicate, to mimic into the tools, basically, what are the best processes, judgments, decisions at the company level, okay? And the combination of that and the feedback loop that Anne was also explaining before has an impact on superior outcomes, okay? So at the end, it's a combination between data, algorithms, which are a kind of representation of our judgments, our processes, and a feedback loop for superior outcomes. So it's more a matter of accelerating toward prescriptions for the business rather than leveraging a technology which is AI or another one. Okay? So at the end, we need to tackle this missing middle. What is important right now for any managers in supply chains, operations, and pricing is that we need to live with this technology. Okay? There are some tasks that are human-only activity, leadership, for instance, judgment, behaviors, okay, there are some elements that you will have to let to the machines because they are more and have a superior performance that you will ever have, okay? So we need to reinvent a little bit the pricing profession, saying that addressing this missing middle, which is the human-machine hybrid, let's say, processes, okay? That's the logic of augmentation. Maybe if we can leverage a tool that does maybe thousands of computation faster than you do, so go for it, right? And that's a very interesting momentum. So it's a good moment for that right now. It's also a perfect moment for pricing, okay? In terms of ranking of use cases in big data and advanced analytics, so fraud is the first one, okay? Then IoT for the amount of investment which is required. Then it's pricing and merchandising, let's say, okay? So very probably in your organization, you already have a very big transformation project, namely digital, big data, analytics, investment at the top level. That's the moment to start a C-level conversation around pricing, around augmented pricing, okay? So a good figure for you to accelerate the conversation, okay? Go where the money is and go also where the impact at the company scale is in your organization, okay? So you're here. Everybody is here, magically. There is a lot of claims. There is a lot of, let's say, intentions. There have been, in the past years, a lot of pilots, trial and errors, okay? And now we start to see a little bit the light at the end of the tunnel. You start to see a little bit the how to get to these AI pilots. So I'm going to give you a recipe. It's a little bit early for a cocktail, okay? But I'm trying to give you some recipes, okay? Around some keywords. First keywords, and the most important one is all this transformation is science, okay? We are talking about a scientific approach. That was a debate right before, art and science. There is no doubt about it. It's about having a scientific approach to pricing decisions, okay? And forget about the art. But what science, okay? Science is about knowledge, okay? It's about removing intuition, gut feeling by a very accurate knowledge about what you are deciding about. That's reality in many cases, okay? We call that the hypo, the highest person opinion in the room, okay? You are going to bring all your dashboards, all your tools, all your arguments in the conversation, and then, decisions is something else, okay? I'm from France, I live in Spain, Latin countries. There is a huge culture of debate, at the end ending in a consensus, and the consensus is never good for decisions, right? Okay, so maybe you have already lived this kind of situation, right? So, are algorithms better? They're not, okay? And algorithms, we say, the word is popping up a lot, is a word used by programmers when they don't know they don't want to explain what they did, okay? The algorithm is doing that. You'll be super happy with my algorithm, and so on and so forth, okay? The reality, that's for fun, but the reality is not better, in fact, okay? In reality, an algorithms is an opinion embedded in math, okay? At the end, in algorithms, you are just replicating biases, processes, decision-making, and so on. That's a very good book, by the way, Weapons of Mass Destruction, explaining a little bit all this kind of gray area that is also coming with big data. Okay, so an algorithm at the end is something which is totally bespoke. It's a formula, but at the end, which is going to reflect pieces of your process, okay? So going back to the autonomous driving example, maybe some parts of your pricing process will be much better served by algorithms, but you need to know that, in fact, these algorithms are going to reflect the, let's say, maybe the subjectivity, the biases that you have in your own way to think about the pricing process as well, okay? Nothing is perfect. That's clear on all that, yes? So what is science really about? Okay, there is a paradigm in science that we call the Occam razor. Okay, that says a little bit that first you should eliminate what is not important. So in the day-to-day, so science could help you basically focus on the most relevant pieces of your process. Okay, the same thing for data, for instance. How many of, so in general, a lot of business managers start a project, okay, initiative, asking, for instance, to take data from the ERP for SAP, and maybe get some customer data from Salesforce. Okay, that's a requirement which is maybe a little bit too broad for IT. Okay, so sometimes also you have to help IT execute the process. It's not always to blame IT for the lack of listening, let's say, or business acumen. Okay, what does it mean precisely? It means that when we work with models, okay, we work with, we try to find something that we call parsimony of a model. The parsimony of a model is few parameters, as few as we can, and the larger explanation of the output. So if I could explain my price variation, for instance, by, I don't know, past prices, competitors' prices, the value of the product, and so on, okay, few parameters, I would have a perfect explanation. So we try to find a simple model, the simpler model at the end, that has the biggest explanation. Then the other element is you have to learn as well. So knowledge is about learning. So you have to learn, observe behaviors, and refine analysis. So that's a big change, not for pricing, but much more for market research. Okay? So it's better to test and control, let's say, a decision you push into the system rather than trying to ask respondents, customers, about the value they perceive on the product. So value-based pricing, for instance, is another territory that is going to be reinvented by AI. You focus on the process as well, not just on the outcome. How do you get to the result? That's also science. And very importantly, automate when efficient. So much more than optimization, let's say data science, that's automation that is going to be a big game changer in pricing management. So science is the first element. Science is knowledge. Okay. The other element in the scientific process or data science-based process for pricing manager is skepticism. Having a doubt on the decision which is made by your system. We talked about Amazon, other examples. So Netflix is also very interesting. Same logic than Amazon. You all know the logic of recommender systems. Okay, that's familiar maybe as a term. So Amazon, Netflix, it's a long tail business. So, okay, so the idea is to maybe make recommendations around movies, or product, and so on. Okay. If you think about these recommender systems, these catalogs, what they do is basically create immense segmentations, both of customers, okay, and products. In many cases, we focus on customers, okay. We totally forget the logic of segmenting correctly your product portfolio. So try to picture this big table of segments of product by customer. By being able to play with recommendations, what Netflix is doing, in fact, is trying to break down the DNA of the product and the DNA, the behaviors of the customers. Trying to understand the why, in fact, some customers are purchasing specific products. Okay? So going back to the example of value-based pricing, if you could open the book of your product portfolio, understand the DNA behind the choice of a product, you could perfectly try to assemble winning combinations of portfolio. Okay? Structure much better your portfolio, what you sometimes you try to do with value-based pricing. So basically, saying that Netflix is also using the recommender system to maybe to impact the creation, the design of the movies, trying to find the perfect combination, the perfect scenario, directors, actors, and so on. Consequence is maybe some uniformity. Okay, a Viking series is very similar, maybe to a middle-aged series, and so on. No? You have lived everything all the same. No? What is very important for me, so in Netflix, in the example, but it's the same thing for Amazon, is the A/B testing logic, the power of testing. Okay, so it's not about the model, it's the power of pushing tests and learning from new behaviors with the system. To rephrase it, if you apply a model to your historical data, okay, you will always miss some data points to understand new behaviors. Okay, if you combine data science with experiments, you are going to explore new price points, new boundaries, new extremes in terms of discounting, for instance, in terms of price points that you never had considered before. That's something, a role we assign traditionally to market research. That's a role that is going to be assigned more and more to A/B testings or more complex experimental designs. Okay? That's totally critical today. Experiments. Okay? That's something we don't address in pricing. Amazon, for instance, Jeff Bezos said that the success of Amazon is function of how many experiments we do per year, per month, per week, per day. Okay? Amazon, 2,000 experiments. P&G, a very good examples of digital reinvention, 7,000. 10,000, Google 7,000, Netflix 1,000. It is increasing and increasing again and again. Okay? So forget about the model, maybe try to push recommendations and learn from these recommendations through sophisticated experimental designs. Okay? What does it mean? Maybe with your salespeople, you come to push maybe some recommendations of dynamic discounting, some promotions across geographies, across types of reps, across categories, and little by little you are going to learn on a wider spectrum of price points, discounts, guidance, and so on. The third element in this kind of a scientific process to augment pricing management is serendipity. So science, okay, is about skepticism on one side, but also discoveries, okay, surprises sometimes. Okay, so another example. For me, Walmart maybe in retail is one of the most fascinating examples. Walmart has built the world's largest private cloud. 40 petabytes of data, 2.5 petabytes of data every hour, 200 data streams, which are, let's say, blended and are represented in smart models that you can consume visually, okay? This space, so that they've built, like many companies which are advanced in data science, they have built a spin-off, a center of excellence called Walmart Labs. And they have a space called the Data Cafe where, in fact, managers can solve narrow problems, small problems, optimize the delivery route in one specific area, optimize a campaign in a specific store, and so on and so forth. So the model should be very bottom-up in the sense that they are small, they are very accurate when they are narrow, okay? And they should maybe be used to fix very small problems, okay? So serendipity, it allows you, through the models, but also through the combination of the consumption of these models, okay, together between business owners and data scientists, to discover new patterns, to discover maybe new solutions to an existing and old problem for business, okay? And for instance, that's something which is very visible right now with the reinvention of BI, okay? Well, you could have BI everywhere, okay? If you have an Apple Watch, you could have maybe Power BI, if you know the tool in your Apple Watch with your KPIs pushed with alert systems and so on. So it's being everywhere now, and the consumption of data is very important to discover maybe new solutions. The next step or stage in augmentation, let's say, is strategy. Okay, and strategy means that maybe you need to fuel with data science, with models, the way you formulate your own strategy. Okay, but maybe you also need, as a pricing manager or as a responsible of these pricing initiatives, maybe you need to think about a data strategy for your own pricing initiative. Okay, so in two directions. So you need to let data drive strategic decisions, because at the end, what these models are helping is to solve complex problems in real time. Okay? That was said also in the answer presentation. Speed is very, very important today. So quite quickly, in fact, there is two dimensions to consider. Okay? Maybe you can try to explore a little bit where do you stand in your company. In many cases, we're talking about sometimes purely internal data. And if you think about your data sources that you're leveraging, depending on the sector, but I think it would be maybe 90% transactional, 90% ERP, right? In some cases, that's the way around. In some cases, in retail, for instance, they are, because it's a commodity, they're starting to be obsessed by competitive benchmark. They only look at competitors, and at the end, everybody is moving in the same direction. It's Black Friday, no? It's next week, no? This weekend. We did a study in Black Friday. We realized that 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, before Black Friday, all the prices in Amazon, the retailers were increasing. Okay, Black Friday, everybody decreasing at the same times, and the delta for the consumer was 0.5. Okay, 0.5%. So everybody is doing the same thing. So be careful, because to tackle the variety of your data, and this variety of data is going to feed maybe different recommendations into your system. So just to say that during many years, we were just staying at the descriptive level, traditional BI, let's say, mainly with ERP data. A few years before, 10 years ago maybe, we were obsessed in pricing with value-based pricing. Okay? But value-based pricing, if it's disconnected from transactional, that's market research, that's very nice, but it's not useful at all for pricing. Okay? So there is a first movement, which is to start with the most important element, the granular piece, which is transactional, and maybe augment this piece with value-based pricing. Consumer and competitors' insights. But at the end, what really matters for the company, for the C-level, is to be context-based, to be able to have a strategy, big guidelines, but to translate these guidelines into very narrow, very small decisions into the systems to react to fluctuations in raw material, in FX rates, for instance, in local competition, to be very granular, bottom-up as Walmart, okay, to base your recommendations by a very specific, granular, and local knowledge of the context, okay, and real time, which is very important. So there is a possible movement, which is keep the same tools and logics, improve them, but go for context, okay? There is another movement, which is to keep with the transactional, for instance, and try to leverage predictive analytics, okay, or maybe AI. What we observe is that a lot of companies are stuck in the middle. They want to do data science, okay, but they don't really know how to leverage data science, okay? They launch elasticity models, but they don't know how to tackle it. So, you know, what the path of acceleration that should be done is to the right, is more important, okay? But instead of being stuck in the middle on predictive, you should go for prescriptions, pushing recommendation to your systems, okay? Just very quickly, in terms of methodology, we try to accelerate this process. So all that on the bottom, data science, so the different levels of analytics, visualization, predictive, prescriptives, engineering, infrastructure, it's enablers. So when I talk to data scientists, for instance, they have a very high self-esteem of their work, but they are an enabler of this transformation. Okay, business should be the owner. At the end, what matters is money, impact, okay, and how you manage this transformation is through what I call acceleration bricks, which are pieces, in fact, of the transformation that are most important ones. The sequence of these pieces, of these Lego bricks. Okay. One example of that. So it's moving very fast. One example of that is Procter & Gamble. So Procter & Gamble, so think about this sequence, for instance. In Procter & Gamble, what they started is a big digital transformation project called business efficiency. The objective of the project was to provide executives with the possibility to forecast 6 to 12 months main KPIs, sales, margin, market share, and so on. Not to have an accurate forecast of these KPIs, but to be able to do it at the beginning, okay? And we started with 3 steps. The first step was, they call that the what models, purely descriptive, few KPIs, very clean across the organization, but limited to few variables. Then they moved to another ambition. They call that the how model. And the how is explaining these KPIs with drivers. So they started to build models, okay? They cleaned some very important data, they start to relate this data to drivers, and then they build models that relate drivers to outcomes, okay? And the last level was what they call actions, and the action was moving to prescriptions, seeing what is the best combination of my drivers that maximizes the impact on my output. What is the best combination of promotions, commercial coverage, for instance, and so on, pieces of my portfolio, not maximizes, for instance, the margin, or a combination of outcomes. So step by steps, very limited ambitions in terms of data cleaning at the beginning, and little by little, a kind of consumptions, a democratization, better set of data science models through the organization. This space here is called Business Fair. That's where C-level management, 50 offices worldwide take decisions, big decisions, okay? So investments, campaigns, and so on. But the translation of this top-down logic is the same data flow, the same models, is also pushed to the system. They have 40,000 employees on system, okay, that receive this recommendation through the dashboard. Okay, so the same thing, same data flow, same models, different types of consumptions from the top to the bottom, from strategic to tacticals. So at the strategy level, vision is a most important one. You have to focus on must-have data, for instance, and then maybe other versions of your product or initiatives are going to enrich the data with more streams. Okay? Same thing. You need to focus on correlate, let's say, business objectives, which are in fact a mix of the objectives you want to achieve. Sales mix is always poorly addressed in the companies. Revenues and margin is quite fine, but at the end, it's a combination of the 3 that you want to achieve. Okay? Some constraints, which are in fact the way you should formulate your strategy, because they operate as constraints on the model that you want to develop. And then these acceleration bricks, in fact, are a combination of few pieces of model that will be useful for your initiative. You need to be able, for instance, to segment, okay? You need also to be able to maybe find some relationship between items. There is dependency into your portfolio, okay? Maybe forecast. Forecasting is a very also poorly addressed topic in pricing and in the companies in general. Elasticity, maybe there is another one, which is optimization. So think about the priorities you have in terms of model. Think what should be an accelerating lever for your company. Very quickly, so all these initiatives, the sequence of transformation should evolve with a kind of analytical maturity ambition. At the beginning, you want to address your process or this guidance, strategy, setting, execution. My recommendation would be to start at very low analytical ambition. You need to install and focus with priority, with a kind of delegation of authority, for instance, okay, about controlling and automating as much as you can without any scientific or intelligent ambitions. The priority is to get the process under control and try to focus on what can be automated from the process, okay? Because this will be a kind of a Trojan horse for your transformation. After that, you can address more complex logics. For instance, another logic which is always not really correctly addressed is that there is dependencies between your list price setting and your discount guidance. You do something on the side, list price setting, discount guidance and commercial conditions on the other side. In fact, they are interdependent. So a priority will be automation. The other priority will be, and it's not very scientific, but try to compute the combination of the interaction between your list price decisions, your price points, and the commercial conditions, because they both have an impact on two pieces of the waterfall. Then what is interesting is how do you accelerate from that? The second layer would be to add a predictive level. The predictive level would be to tackle some acceleration bricks, as I was saying before. Maybe a segmentation could be more dynamic, more granular, okay? Maybe you need some forecasting because the guidance you push into the system needs to be much more accurate, much more granular, okay? And then you can then build from that. You have a segmentation, you can have elasticity, you can have association rules, no? The inter-item relationship I was saying before, and so on. And what will be the last level? Okay, predictive will be to inject some predictive models and data science. And the last level will be really prescriptive. And what is prescriptive is really focused on two things. On optimization on one side. I want to optimize my guidance based on my baseline, my forecast, push this recommendation to the systems, and the rest should be as automated as we can. And here you have some technology interesting in terms of workflow automation, robotic process automation, which is a big also keyword right now, RPA, and something. Very quickly, scalability is also another component. You have to scale the initiatives, so this sequence is very important. For that, we focus a lot on what we call data product. So if I go back a little bit here, it's a big revolution for pricing management, but much more than saying that data is a new oil that you see a lot of presentation. The big change is much more like the production chain that Ford implemented in the second revolution. You can accelerate a lot the production of models and tools. Okay, so you can think about, in fact, data products like a production process. Okay, you can leverage the data science team as a production process, objective, outcomes, and then maybe some pieces of the models, a sequence in delivering the models. Okay, so here enablers. You need some data, you need some data scientists. Okay, but who is the owner of formulating the objectives? Is pricing. Who is the owner of measuring the results? Is pricing or business in general. Okay, so the role, the position of business or pricing in this digital transformation is central because you are the ones that are going to, to guide the execution of the process. If you picture it as a transformation, the sequence I was mentioning, the scalability is smart mall, agile, no MVP. In pricing, you have different use cases you can think about. Efficiency use case, growth use cases. Control is efficiency. Maybe segmentations, portfolio redefinition is growth, okay? And little by little, you are going to accumulate, pile up some use cases, okay? And at the same time, you are piling up the use cases, you are going to install enablers into the system. A new model, for instance, is going to be maybe recycled for another use case and so on, okay? Going back to the use case ranking, as I was saying before, fraud and pricing, you can share, if you start by, your company has started by fraud, very probably you can recycle part of the models built or the capabilities built to impact your pricing management process. So, as a conclusion, that's only the beginning, in fact, because the way we tackle these transformations is constantly improved with new technology. And the first one is what we call AutoML, automated machine learning. So now, in fact, data science, which is very iterative and time-consuming, is being automated. Okay, so you have tools like, for instance, H2O. H2O is one tool. Data Robot is another tool that allows to automate the process of data science, of machine learning itself. Okay. Another technology is what we call containers or microservices. So now this model can be packed, okay, and then pushed as API or a small piece of tool or software into the system. So going back to the transformation, you could think about your needs, your use cases, your bricks as a model that can be packaged and pushed into your current system, in fact. So rather than big transformation, you could think about pieces of software that can be pushed to augment your pricing process. And the other element is the cloud environment, this logic of end-to-end platforms that eases a lot the transformation and the access to these technologies. So now, for instance, image recognition models are a community in the tools. It's a brick you plug and you can start to apply into your systems. Okay. So we've been talking about, in fact, some capabilities: science, serendipity, skepticism, strategy, scalability, and maybe the last one is the impact on society. There's a big impact on the way we take decisions. We've been talking also on dynamic pricing, for instance. There is a gray area also in what you do with your consumers in dynamic pricing. So that's also maybe another topic to address for pricing manager. A little bit dense, okay, but I hope it was a good start for the conversations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manu. Any one question or two questions, quick? Back there.
Good morning. The example that you gave about the Vortex tool, is that incorporated or included or integrated with the other commercial systems like CRM or CPQ, or can you just elaborate on that?
Yes, so just an example to say that, in fact, in some companies, let's say large companies or mid-sized to large companies, usually have some capabilities for development. You do already things in terms of web design, for instance. So something that could be also an interesting move in terms of pricing could be to leverage these capabilities and to apply the same logic you do for a web or for a digital tool to pricing. What does it mean? It means that, in fact, in this first logic of controlling the process, maybe the delegation of authority, the discount approval workflow is the most important piece. You can find it on the shelf. You can also perfectly design it, bespoke, in your company, leveraging your development teams, for instance. In that case, would be a bespoke development, connecting the tools, so leveraging the capabilities of the company. Okay, it's something which is let's say a small development to be made. Okay, and then of course you embed it into the current systems. If it's SAP, Salesforce, for instance, then you work on the connections. Just to say that, in fact, you have to dimension your needs. Your need sometimes is smaller than the reality of what you think about. So it's not a big transformation. More and more, it's a personal opinion, but more and more it's going to go to microservices, small bricks, small pieces of transformation. So you focus on what's really central. Yeah.
Okay. One question over there.
Historically, the pricing profession has evolved, the supplier of services to the pricing people here in the room has evolved on one side on the consulting, strategic-based and value-based was coming from that. And then you have the software vendors, and the last 20 years has been a big evolution of both. But they've been mostly parallel to some extent. It sounds like in what you're describing today, and I would like you to elaborate if you can, there's a new merger or a new synergy, direct synergy between pure analytics or AI and pure strategy, but one feeding off the other. Can you elaborate on that, or is that?
Yeah, again, sorry, very, very interesting. Again, it's a personal opinion. Okay, so what I think is that during many cases there was 15 years ago there was only one option. So there was always a need of consulting. It's everywhere. Okay, but there was only one option, which was to gear pricing, the pricing process with tools, with software. Okay, and a lot of transformation started with the software as the first piece in large companies. Now we start to rediscover that the process is at the center. and the process is the ownership of the pricing department. Okay, so you need to have a combination of guiding the increase of maturity of the process, leveraging the tools on the right level. So, but again, the software development approach has changed as well as on more modern platforms, leveraging the SaaS logic, the cloud logic. So the frontier between the two is much more hybrid right now, and you need a combination, the best of the both worlds, in fact. Yeah.
Okay, one last one and then we move on.
Okay. So most of us here are the senior pricing leaders of our companies, and probably most of us don't know AI. So how much should we be educated? How should we alter our own learning to be able to lead such transformations internally?
If you have to choose a priority, okay, my recommendation would be to start to build a culture of data, which means that in fact this culture of data is not really a culture of the potential of AI. That's one of the pieces, maybe one extreme, and start to be able to consume the data that you already have in the most efficient way. So between, if you look at maturity from visualization to predictive models, data science, pure data science, to AI, that would be maybe optimization, automation, I will maybe start to focus on maybe visualization first, try to democratize the access with tools that allows you to really to dive into the opportunities at the very first beginning, because it's a way to educate not only your pricing department, but also the company, sales people, okay? But it's also a way to start to assemble a better and a more accurate pieces of data, because data is always a problem. Data is a big issue in the software deployment, okay, in any kind of model deployment. So by starting with low ambitions, visualization, but done correctly, you start also to assemble the data that you need, the master data, have cleaner data, and also start to engage the conversation on the right level, start to increase the culture. If you start, for instance, one of the failure of some startups that are moving a lot in the AI-based pricing industry, one of the failures is to start directly with a more accurate model, a more powerful model, when there is so much to do in terms of data cleaning, in terms of data culture. So we start gradually. For me, the logic of maturity, visualization, predictive, prescriptive is working very well, depending on the use cases, because you have so much to do in transforming the process and the culture, that we start with the right visualization approach, which is changing a lot. Now you can use a voice recommendation for BI building, for instance. You can say, tell me my top 10 price realization consumer, for instance. Starting to evolve, so tackle this low ambition visualization, but done correctly, and then you'll see how you can accelerate.
Okay, thank you, Manu. So before we